This is my notes we are looking at here. Why you have insulin levels very high and glucose levels very high. Why? So this is a pancreas which makes insulin. It's a protein. It takes amino acids, combine them and makes this hormone a protein. Yeah, we just don't call it a protein, but it's a protein. Amino acids combine. And this is your glucose, whether it's coming from the liver or from the gut. Glucose molecules comes to here. We call here the blood. So insulin should be going with glucose, and their target is a cell, an organ cell. So they come across to this organ cell, and guess what? The cell wanted the glucose, but when the glucose reached here, there seems to be some indication that I could only get maybe 20% of what I asked for. So the liver gets this signal, and the liver says I will make some more glucose and send more glucose. Pancreas responds, let me make some more insulin to help the glucose, and they go on a journey again, and they reach the same spot, and here they have the same problem. The cell wanted, let's say, 500,000 molecules of glucose. It only could get 1,000. Again, it sends the signal back to the liver and says, send me what I asked you for. And so the liver makes more glucose, and the pancreas respond also, makes more insulin, and the journey begins. So now we have a whole boatload of glucose just floating around in the blood, yet for this guy cannot take in what it needs, because somehow something is wrong with the cells. And so we need to figure out how to repair these cells at the receptor, the intake site, the receptor site. And here is where we need to look at omega-3, omega-6, C15. Do not confuse a nutrient C15 with a supplement fatty 15. So if you're vegan, look into fatty 15. If you are meat eater, you drink milk, ghee, butter, you should be getting fatty 15 from there in adequate amounts. You may just have to restructure your diet, removing carbs from your meat, and that might help. And of course, you need to have chromium, some say vanadium also, D3, which is the vitamin D3, which is taken with K2, and then you have magnesium. Well, one guy say magnesium ionic blend or something like that. These would help repair this part here. Okay, so the fatty acids, omega-3, omega-6, C15, any other fatty acids would help repair the cellular receptor sites or the membrane of the cells. Now, this is at the cells level. Now, berberine is said to be good in helping control glucose. Allulose is a sugar that helps to control glucose by making the kidney pure glucose easy. There are many other things you could do to control glucose, like let the muscles suck up the glucose, so that means you exercise. Red light or sunshine helps the muscles activate mitochondria that sucks up the glucose, so you would not have a lot of glucose in the blood. So that's point number 2, dealing with the extra glucose that will be in the blood. Because don't think that the glucose is just there and it will disappear. No, things have to be done to get rid of the glucose while you work on this. So if this takes you 3 months, you have to be managing glucose in your blood, which means you have to find all these other strategies here. Now, one of the things you want to do is try to let the liver be the supplier of glucose and not the gut. Now, if the liver is the supplier of glucose, then you have to think about fats and oils in your diet, so that the liver would be the one bringing in glucose on demand. If you have high carb diet, or you continue with a lot of carb in your diet, which is natural for the pre-diabetic craving, So you need to think about allulose to kind of help you there. But if you use your liver to do what it needs to be done, the liver will only respond when it gets the call to send X amount of glucose molecules into the bloodstream, targeting that specific organ that made the call, that made the request. And when that happens, you have a more control amount. But of course, the problem is still there, so it goes 20% absorbed by that system, and you still have 70% floating around in the blood. And that's where your things like allulose could help the kidney excrete. Berberine could help managing. I don't know how berberine works in managing blood glucose, but it is well known there. There are many other supplements and many other things you could do to help curb the effects of the blood glucose level. The blood glucose level, not the digestive system absorption of glucose, but the blood glucose. When the glucose is in the blood, you have things like allulose, you have things like exercise, red light, sunshine as good management strategies to grab out some of the molecules here and let them go to the muscle cells, and that way you are managing your blood glucose level. And you ask now the final part, so how do we manage with the pancreas making all this insulin? Well, insulin is basically amino acids coming together in the pancreas, I guess, and becoming this molecule, this transformed molecule called insulin, which is amino acids. So it's called a hormone, but it's already a protein here, combination of amino acids. Whatever the name is, doesn't matter, that's just science name. And you don't have to do anything with that, because as soon as insulin does its job, it goes back down, it breaks up itself and go back into its individual amino acids. And then you don't have to worry about amino acids so much, because they are one of the molecules that cannot stick around in the body for too long. They break down themselves back into amino acids, and if they are sticking around too long in the body, they would actually convert themselves back into more glucose, which is, oh no, back into more glucose. So more glucose in the blood again. Geez, more glucose in the blood. When you have more glucose in the blood, you have the same problem occurring over and over and over. So it's a vicious cycle. And when the vicious cycle starts, you need to manage it by saying organs, we need to fix you at the cellular level. The membranes of the cell needs to be repaired, so that this thing we call insulin pounding, or I will call it glucose resistance, or glucose uptake, the low glucose uptake into the cell. For example, in the brain could become insulin resistant, so it has low glucose uptake. It needs glucose if it is glucose it's getting, or if it's getting ketone bodies, that's fine, but it needs to be able to suck in the glucose, and that is where the problem is coming. The glucose is coming, but that whole contraption here between the blood brain barrier, we call it this gap, where the blood have the glucose here and it needs to jump over into the brain, that is not functioning right, and that is where we need to know about the fatty acids. The fatty acids seems to be the ones that could repair or restructure the gap. Thank you for viewing.